He was retro before retro was cool. All this and more coming up on This Week in Retro.
High-resolution color graphics.
This land of high technology.
The revolution in technology that made the information age possible.
Those kids are not afraid of computers.
50 years of Apple.
The moon and the computer art that made sure we didn't miss.
Omega Race counts as racing. It's a look at classic game code disassembled and decompiled for future excellence. And claw machine hijinks along with mini CRT arcade cabinets coming up on this week's show for the week of the 11th of April 2026.
Up-to-date news for out-of-date tech.
Hello and welcome to another episode of This Week in Retro. This is the final of 3 weeks where Chris is not with us, and as we mentioned last week, we've been taking advantage of the opportunity to get some guests on who are on the Pacific coast of North America, where it's a little bit trickier to have them on all at the same time. So we would like to welcome Jeff Vogel, who is the founder, inventor, creator, do-it-all, and he's having a sip right now of Spiderweb software. Welcome, Jeff, to the program.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, it's a pleasure to have you. And Jeff is amazing. Started making indie games in 1994 with a company, Spiderweb Software, and just kept going. He didn't go bankrupt, didn't liquidate the company, didn't sell out to EA, wasn't bought out, kept going all this time.
You may have the only game properties not currently owned by Microsoft now that we really think about it.
Oh God, I wish I keep wanting to sell out, but no one's buying. I mean, Microsoft could have me for so cheap, but there is no interest. I'll just give my quick spiel really quick, just so people know what this weirdo is doing on their screen. So I have been writing. I started Spiderweb Software in 1994. We write turn-based retro old school fantasy role-playing games. They were retro and old school in 1994. And I believe that I've been writing indie games for a living continuously longer than any other person on Earth. There are people who are writing indie games, we called them shareware back in the Stone Age, before me, but all of them came to their senses. They got real jobs. They took very long sabbaticals, and I'm the only one who kept bloody-mindedly plugging away at it with the tenacity of the cockroach week in and week out for the last 32 years. We've wrote the series Exile, Avernum, Nethergate, Geneforge, Abaddon, Queen's Wish. I've written about 19 full-length games and many, many remasters, because I'm at the point in my career where I'm spending more time doing remasters of games that are really good but are 20 years old. Anyway, I'm older than the stones in the dirt, and sometimes people online pick at me for bragging about having done it continuously so long. To which I say, it's a dumb record. It's a dumb thing to be proud of, but it's mine. And that's what I have.
I think it's simply amazing. No one else has managed it. You've managed it. I mean, when I've watched some of your presentations, you've talked. There was a couple of times where it was touch and go, where you may not have managed through the struggles, but you made it all the way through, and it's absolutely amazing. I quite like you describing yourself as a toy maker tinkering in your basement.
Yeah. So the company is run by me and my wife. My wife is my business manager, and she helps me with single thing. I couldn't do it without her. And she just creates the protective shell around me so that I can go into my office and just tell stories and, tinker and make up games, I started doing that when I was 5. And it's a lifelong compulsion. And I was just very, very lucky to get into it at exactly the right moment with exactly the right product. Like in 1994, the World Wide Web only existed as like a demo. There was no web. It was the internet was very ad hoc and thrown together, and it was very difficult to sell software. People succeeded. I mean, this was the era that Doom came out of. It was possible to make a decent living writing shareware, but it was incredibly difficult. And no one, when the internet was getting big, I was like, I want to sell stuff over this. And nobody thought it was possible. The hardest struggle I had making a real business was gaining the ability to accept credit cards. And I had to take them over the phone because there wasn't a web. There wasn't web stores. There wasn't Steam. People called me on the phone. I was talking to human beings all the time instead of, making games. And so I had to go to banks and convince them that I was trying to run a legitimate business.
Yeah.
And, at that point, there was only two ways to make money on the internet: pornography and fraud. And I was trying to convince them that I was selling video games over the internet. Video games came in a box with a plastic square or a plastic disc at the time. Plastic discs were barely even a thing at the time. It was mainly squares. My first games went out on floppy disk because nobody had CD players. And so that was a struggle. That we had to code our own store from scratch. My wife did that. My wife rolled her own online store because it didn't exist otherwise. And and that's the sort of thing we had to do.
Yeah, we'll definitely fold some more of the saga of Spiderweb software into the stories as we're covering them this week. But quickly, if people do want to use their credit cards, which is a lot easier to do now, what's the best place to find what Spiderweb is up to these days?
So our newest game is called Vernum 4 Greed and Glory. It's really good. We worked really hard on it. It's a remaster of Vernum 4 that came out about 20 years ago. And it really is one of the best things I've ever done. Our games are on Steam, of course. That's the main place. GOG.com is a great place to buy our games. Our own website, spiderwebsoftware.com. But yeah, if you're interested in a really fun, old-school role-playing game with story-heavy turn-based, Vernum 4 Greed and Glory is very good. Our GeneForge series is hugely popular. GeneForge 1 Mutagen has done really well for us. And going back a little bit, our Vernum series is our most popular series overall. A Vernum Escape from the Pit, a Vernum 2 Crystal Souls, a Vernum 3 Ruined World. Just go to Google Spiderweb Software Steam, Google Spiderweb Software. You will get a deluge of games. We've written too many games. Oh, dear God. Nobody could ever play all of our nonsense. But even though we write turn-based role-playing games, in between our series are very different because the role-playing games design space is very large. So all of our games play super differently, but Vernum and GeneForge are definitely the places to start. Thank you for reminding me to sell my games. I'm not actually good at business.
So Steam, GOG, spiderwebsoftware.com. The deluge is coming. Links in the show notes.
Yeah, I think it's quite appropriate you started in 1994 when my favorite series, Ultima, decided it wasn't going to be any good anymore.
Yeah, I mean, Ultima was an enormous influence on me. Not only Richard Garriott, I went to a summer camp where Richard Garriott was one of the counselors. In between releasing Ultima and Ultima 2, he did a gig as a counselor at a computer camp in Lake Tahoe, and he taught a class on writing video games. So I took a video game programming class from Richard Garriott. Wow. And all his kids ran around and pestered him all the time to show us Ultima 2 demos. And so he actually put in Ultima 2 in a hidden place, a summer camp where kids would just run around and pester you about when the new game is coming out.
Interesting.
Right, shall we get on with the show, Jason?
Let's do it. So some of these big anniversaries do kind of sneak up on us here at This Week in Retro, but Apple Computer turned 50 years old when the calendar turned to April. So let's talk about the California startup that was spun up by a couple of young tech industry workers that's grown into one of the largest organizations in human history. And having Jeff on, I mean, this is perfect. When I first learned about Spiderweb, you were, I believe, a Mac-only publisher. Can you give us just briefly kind of your history with the Apple ecosystem and are Apple products still your daily drivers?
My first computer was an Apple II Plus in 82, 83. I started using Macs in 1984. As soon as they came out, I was lucky enough to be able to fiddle with them. My first computer was real computer was a Power Mac. We got our start as a Mac-only developer and then moved to Windows. There were many years early on when the biggest role-playing game release, or even maybe one year, the biggest game release for the Mac was by me. Not because my games are so great, but because nobody.
The Mac market was just that bad, yeah.
Yeah, Mac was great money for us because we were the only people who were developing for it. Yeah, I've always had, like all developers, our relationship with Apple is love-hate. But I'm doing this on a Mac. I do all my coding on a Mac, write all my games on a Mac first because it's still ahead of Windows. Not as much as it used to be, but it's still, I just get more work done faster.
So the BBC took a look back with an article, Apple at 50, Where Did the Tech Giant Succeed and Fail?, which was posted by our own Duncan. And shortly after Duncan posted it, and I took a quick look at the 3 Apple hits and 3 Apple misses that they highlighted, Antiques for Geeks also chimed in and pointed out, kind of tough to credit a list like that completely missed the Apple II platform that Jeff started out on, because the Apple II made Apple into a real player in personal computing, and not to mention directly providing the capital that led to Macintosh development. So I want to talk a little bit about what of those 6 products the BBC settled on and see if we can offer a little different perspective. So for Apple's hits, it's notable that the BBC article chose 3 21st century devices, and they all represent personal technology beyond the personal computer: the iPod, the iPhone, and the Apple Watch. And if you are a skeptic of the latter, an analyst that was interviewed for the story pointed out that if you broke out just the Apple Watch business, it would still be like one of the top 300 businesses in America by revenue. So not too shabby over there. And then they talk about the 3 misses. And from a company that's got as long and varied and development history that Apple has, you really could go in a lot of different directions in this. I found that 2 of them are pretty clear cut. I think you can argue, and I think you can make a successful argument that the false start of the Apple Lisa gets you to a more stable and successful Macintosh market down the line. And it was not the first time that Apple struggled to carve out a space in upmarket workstations. And then they mentioned the Vision Pro VR headset. Honestly, I have so steadfastly avoided all this VR headset business. I had no idea that even existed, or at least completely forgot. So I'm happy to call that a clear miss. The third choice for a miss I thought was a bit finicky. They single out what they called the butterfly keyboard mechanism that Apple used in the mid-2010s as a miss. And I do remember knowing people that bought those machines at the time that railed against them, liking neither the feel nor the fragility of the keys. But I wanted to throw this to both Jeff and Dave. Do you have an alternative for 1 hit and or 1 miss that you'd add to that tally as we take what for the purposes of the show must be a necessarily brief look back at 50 years of Apple products? And for what it's worth, the BBC used the framing construct that they were things that, quote, changed our lives. So do you have any nominations there?
Yeah, I mean, if we're going to go for one that changed our lives, then it has to be iTunes. That's a glaring omission there. iTunes is a huge thing. It set the platform for the iPod. I don't think you get the iPod without iTunes. It's such an important thing for Apple. Yeah.
So first of all, for the most revolutionary product, it has to be the Macintosh, which invented modern personal computing. Everyone was just always chasing that. iTunes, absolutely. I can't understand putting the Apple Watch there. I mean, it's kind of neat. It's a form factor, but you don't really see them that often. The Apple Watch was never that big a deal. The Vision Pro, I mean, it was obviously a miss. No one wants that nonsense, but it was also developing was just a rounding error in Apple's budget. That was just a skunkworks project that chewed its own leg off and escaped. And then no one had a market for $3,000 of whatever that was. But yeah, the Macintosh was absolutely revolutionary. iTunes, the iPhone, just completely made what we think of as computers. And you always have to give them credit for that. Everyone was just always chasing them with those.
I'll pick on the Pippin because it was both as something that nobody needed to the point of Jeff being one of the largest Mac game developers in the 1990s. Nobody needed a Mac-based game machine, and at the same time,
wanted one.
Well, right, but give them credit for not having their confidence completely shattered because they have successfully entered markets that nobody necessarily thought that Apple needed to be in. After that. But it's intriguing to me that no generation of Mac was mentioned as a hit. And that does seem like, even though I would still argue that the Macintosh 128K, the original model, still might be the single worst value for money at the time that it shipped.
Oh, God damn. It might as well have been made of silver for how much it cost. I'm gonna be since it's retro, I'm gonna be super old. I'm one of the few people you ever met who has actually used a Newton.
Yeah, Newton also very, very high on the list.
Of recollection. So for people who don't remember, in other words, everyone, Apple started trying to make handheld computers like early sort of iPads super early, like in the mid-90s. And they created what's called a Newton, which was it was meant to be like the precursor of the smartphone. But you used a stylus and you wrote on it, and it used handwriting recognition, but the handwriting recognition was never there. So you could never actually get it to do anything. But you could hold it in your hand, as I did, and know that somewhere in here was the future. They just hadn't figured out from here to there yet. I owned a Newton once. Like someone gave me their old one because I got fed up with it and I threw it away. I wish I still had it. It'd be such nerd cred to own some of that, one of those artifacts.
Do you have one, Jason?
No, I don't have a Newton. No Newton, no Pippin.
Looking back, it is amazing the stuff they tried. It was like even their mistakes were brilliant. They would just they just did the right thing too early sometimes. So maybe we will all be wearing Vision Pros someday, except they'll be embedded in our eyeballs. We'll go full Black Mirror with it.
Yeah, there'll be a different iteration that'll finally make wearables or heads up or both work. Anyway, Dr. Local also pointed us to a 7-minute interview that the Wall Street Journal's Ben Cohen conducted with Apple CEO Tim Cook over a collection of the company's archival materials, including a lot of these, aborted attempts to build the thing, first-generation prototypes. They had patent documentation related to the Apple II, the original and very large prototype boards for things like the original iPhone, the original Apple Watch. Now, Cook was given the same sort of question we just discussed, name a specific failure that was most important for Apple. He demurred on the point. He just said, oh, well, they've all been growth experiences. I'm paraphrasing. I get it. Maybe the CEO or a CEO who isn't a Steve Jobs type shouldn't be calling out specific products and therefore specific teams that way. But another thing that's interesting about that video is that, again, the Macintosh computer is not mentioned at all. And the BBC article really only mentioned it as, the platform for delivering the butterfly keyboard. But in these two retrospective places, that was the only place the Mac was mentioned, which seems odd. And in a way, I do get it, given that these things are coming out in 2026. Cohen shows Tim Cook a clipping of the very first mention that Apple ever received in the Wall Street Journal. It's from 1978, and it's an article talking about how investors are finally getting interested in making money investing in personal computer companies. Now, today, can you imagine somebody making a big investor pitch that is specifically geared around the concept of a personal computer? Not a wearable, not a smartphone, not some other piece of embedded or personal tech, but a personal computer?
Well, for Apple pitches, they seem to find out what the market wanted, find out what was going to be the next big thing. And then the key thing that Apple did was that others couldn't quite do is they got consumers to realize that they wanted the product. So the stuff iPods, iTunes, and all the rest of it, the technology there wasn't necessarily invented by Apple, but Apple made a good version of it, showed it to consumers, and consumers says, I want that. I didn't even know what that was until I saw that, but now I want an iPhone. Now I'll use iTunes, and that's what they did there. For me, though, the big thing for Apple is the Apple II, and it's because that's where all the games that I love come from. Everything seems to come from the Apple II. If you go back far enough, all the role-playing games and adventures start off there. Not just that, even the American developers nearly all started on the Apple II. You hear about them, and John Romero or Brendan Romero say, oh, Apple II. And that's where they started it out. But the Mac, the only reason I would ever wanted to have a Mac was because I heard about these role-playing games that I couldn't play on PC from Spidersoft. That's the only reason I ever wanted to have a Mac.
I apologize I grabbed a box and I was fidgeting because, I got my Atari sort of bubble wrapped in the back there, but here's some retro. This is in my desk, I always have a version 1.0 iPhone. This is like one of the very first ones. I bought it for my wife for her birthday because I wanted her to have one time in her life when she was at the very cutting edge of technology. She's an engineer nerd. When you talk about them, yes, they do, really they really dump on the Mac. They really neglect the Mac. And when they invented the Mac, they really neglected the Apple II. And one of the things someone said to me, and it really changed how I looked at things, if you want a bit of Kremlinology for what Apple cares about, Kremlinology, there's a retro word. If you want a hint of what Apple internally actually cares about, walk into an Apple store and look at store space and look at what you see first. The stuff in the back corner they don't care about. The closer it gets, the more they care about it. They don't really care about the Macintosh. Speaking as someone who uses Macintoshes all the time, the Macintosh is not a well-maintained piece of hardware or software. They are not doing a good job of keeping the engineering of that software up to date, I'm sorry to say. But because, it's a personal computer. And the Mac has always been like the distant also-ran for the personal computer market behind Windows. But they can crush with these. So, the only Apple only cares about Macintosh as a device for writing stuff for this. Right. Beyond that, the Macintosh has always kind of floundered. It's the machine that you use for mixing music for your band if you're a person who is never actually going to have a band.
And I will put a pin in that thought you had, Dave, about how all the RPGs come from the Apple II. We'll come back to that in story 3. But Apple has not won every market competition it ever entered. To Jeff's point, the Mac has never been the dominant PC platform. And it hasn't even been the dominant provider in every single tech generation since it was founded. But you got to consider how many other companies burned hotter but fell faster. I mean, never mind Atari, Commodore. Even IBM has been completely out of the personal computer industry for over 2 decades now. So Apple's staying power has been tremendous. However, there's no guarantee that the 60th anniversary will be as much of a victory lap as this 50th has been. So in about 500 episodes or so, let's find out.
We are sponsored this week by PCBWay.com. PCBWay are a PCB manufacturing place that you can buy not just PCBs from. You can get your PCBs made in a variety of different colours, including a nice retro green now, not a modern green PCB, but a nice retro green so that it matches your ISA slots. But also you can get CNC milling done. You can get them to pick and place your PCBs for you. And they'll do 3D printing as well as other different things. But we like them for a reason, Jason. Why do we like them so much?
Yeah, they've got a shared projects platform. It's essentially social media and collaboration, but in the form of a PCB shop. And this week you can't do any better for This Week in Retro than this is from C64 Istanbul. It's a 9-pin Atari/Commodore game controller to 15-pin PC controller converter. So if you've got your old Sound Blaster card and you'd like to hook up a classic CX40 to it, you now have that adapter ready for you on PCBWay. Also, a very intriguing project. If you are somebody, there's a whole cottage industry of people trying to reclaim and repurpose some of that older Apple tech, some early generation iPads. This is a driver board that converts an iPad generation 3 or 4 to a DisplayPort display. So you can get a nice 2048 by 1536 display for whatever you got that can output DisplayPort, which of course is just kind of HDMI and a funny hat. So if you've got a PC or some other device that's outputting a DisplayPort, and you want to have a nice little stand-up, pop-up screen for it, you've got a cast-off iPad 3 or 4, this board will help you get there. And for those of you out there interested in shortwave radio, there's a ZZRX40 receiver build. The creator, who is in Sri Lanka, said that they found this design going through some old issues of QAX magazine. It's designed by Craig Johnson originally, and now it is a simple and easy-to-build 40-meter direct conversion receiver. All sorts of things for both contemporary and retro tech in the shared project section at PCBWay, and we thank them for supporting us. And Dave, what should people do if they would like to sponsor an upcoming episode of the show?
Yeah, so if you want to sponsor an upcoming episode of This Week in Retro, write to TWIR, TWIR, at thisweekinretro.com for details. As you listen to this, the Orion craft of the Artemis II mission will have completed its mission to the moon and will have splashed down in the Pacific Ocean. Well, at least I think so. As we record this, the spaceship has entered the moon's sphere of influence, and they're now caught in its gravity rather than the Earth's. And in fact, during today's recording, Artemis 2 should lose the signal to Earth as it passes around the moon. It's exciting stuff, and for the three of us today, it's the first time there's been a moon mission that we're able to remember. The last time there was a moon mission, I was wearing a nappy. And in fact, they will soon see a solar eclipse that is unique to the moon that you can't see from the Earth. It is, I was surprised to hear, powered by a retro computer. The Orion uses an IBM PowerPC 750FX, the same CPU that you'd get in an Apple iBook G3 in 2002. And almost the same as what you get in a Nintendo GameCube or a Nintendo Wii. Now, they have slightly changed it. They've hardened it against radiation. Apparently, that's why they don't want a more modern computer controlling it. Seems it would get fried by the radiation, or might get fried by the radiation. It also does show that we're well into the point where computers have been extremely powerful for decades. And for a single-purpose system, this is a CPU that's over 20 years old, and it's perfectly fine for a job. Now, there are other computers they are up to in the thing, including iPhones and a Microsoft Surface that apparently Outlook failed to work on. And the controls and the displays are actually a lot more modern, but the actual flight computer is a 2002 PowerPC. And that takes us to today's submission from G7VFY. It's a video showing us the computers that powered the Voyager space program. Now, these are great big mainframes, UNIVAC and IBM machines. And according to the Hackaday article, they are less powerful than an ESP32. An ESP32 is a tiny little cheap device, a fiver, that's used in all sort of devices now. If you want to add Wi-Fi to some device in your home, you'll put this little ESP32 on it, and it's more powerful than these mainframes from the 70s. And I did a bit of maths. The 2002 Orion CPU, retro and out of date, well out of date, is still 2,500 times more powerful than the Voyager stuff, with 3,700 times more RAM and a fraction of the cost too. It does 400 million instructions per second compared to the 80,000 per second of the UNIVAC, which is incredible. And that was over 20 years ago. So it's really difficult to properly grasp how much things have changed. A 2-decade gap means an almost unimaginable increase in power. But you've got that both ways, from the end of the 70s to 2002, and then from 2002 until now, you've got these massive increases in power. So it's so difficult to grasp what it is. But yeah, hopefully the moon mission will be the success we hope it is, and they'll be completed by the time you watch this. But I wanted to ask you, Jeff, you started with games in 1994, and it is now what feels like 10 years later, but it's actually over 30 years since 1994. Does the increase in raw power lead to better games? Is that a linear improvement, or is it just helping to take off the sharp edges?
There was a weird progression where, after a couple decades after, when I started, like, computers were getting more powerful, and then as soon as people got the power, they used it for more fancy graphics, for more polygons, for more performance. And then after about 15, 20 years, that peaked where we had as many polygons as we wanted. And now computers are fast enough to run anything. Now, when you release a new game, you don't want to have too many polygons, so it can run on more cruddy computers or iPads or whatever. So the really demanding software games don't really happen much anymore. I mean, I'm playing a lot of Mugenics, which is a really hit indie game, and the big hit indie game now is Slay the Spire 2. These games do not need powerful computers. Slay the Spire could have existed, which may be the most perfect indie game ever made, could have run perfectly well on computers 20 years ago. So it's gotten to the point where now the real advances are not in tech and using tech. The real advances are in design, in just finding ways to make cool, fresh games. And most cool, fresh game ideas don't need a lot of computing power. There's always going to be some games that really want to eat the power, like the big AAA games where you're running around a city and you want to render the whole city. But if you look at all the hits, like look at the indie hits, look at Undertale, look at Balatro, look at all these games don't need powerful computers. Some of them you could almost have written on the Intellivision. That's an exaggeration, but a mild one. Yeah, it's just a strange in terms of we have all of this computing power, and the main thing we do is waste it. The main use of the computing power now is to abandon any concept of efficient code, of optimization. Like when I use Google Chrome, every one of my windows is eating up 500 megabytes of RAM. I can see it in the tracker. And I remember once driving an hour and spending $400 to buy 16 megabytes of RAM just so I could do my job. We have this unbelievable increase in technology, and it just gives us an excuse to be sloppy. And I know that is an incredibly old person sentiment, but it is still a problem, because now when I just bought my new computer and it has a solid state hard drive that has like 300 gigs of space on it. And now all of a sudden, everyone's wastefulness is a real problem for me, because now all of the hard drives are small. Okay, now I'm just rambling, and I'm sorry. I just have to correct, because it's going to drive me crazy. This is my version 1.0 iPhone. I grabbed the wrong dead iPhone. So
it looked a bit big.
Yeah, I didn't, and I knew people were going to be on YouTube like, aha, Jeff's getting senile. He held up, he was showing us a version 1.0 iPhone, and he held up a cat. I know what a cat looks like. No, this is it. This is it. I checked. It's got a little crack in it. It's got the ridiculous 30-pin whatever. Don't yell at me.
All right. We've settled that one. Yes, for everybody, you can delete your comments that you made 15 minutes ago. Yeah, when you were talking about the specs, Dave, I realized like there's definitely a joke in here about this, old Power PC. Nintendo will do anything to avoid having to update to newer hardware. In truth, hardened chips are pretty amazing. You think about the satellites that have been in productive service for multiple decades, getting their firmware and FPGA style updates, from hundreds of miles below while they're whirling around in orbit and, absorbing a lot more radiation than your phone, which is, more or less constantly talking to both a wide area and at least one local area network are getting. I have been a writer for TI in recent years, and every so often I get to talk to one of their people about their aerospace and military grade chips, and it is a strangely fascinating area. And nobody asked me, but I do want to protest positioning this as a mission to the moon. If you are not landing on the moon, it is not a mission to the moon in my book. Amen.
So yeah, our best wishes with the rest of the moon mission, and hopefully there'll be loads more of them because I find them super exciting.
I assert that you will have fun as a patron of our show. There's actually quite a bit of exclusive content out there right now from Chris, Dave, Duncan, and me on the site. And of course, your support helps our ongoing efforts to create the show. We want to thank Peter for joining on at the monthly level. We offer both monthly and annual support options. You can see those and the exclusive content at patreon.com/thisweekinretro.
And we found 3 new reviews of the show on Apple Podcasts UK. Thank you very much to Macros T Black, Banjo Bear, and Control Vanta. So please support us on our drive to 50 for Duncan's 50th birthday jubilee by posting a review on your favourite podcast app or one of the aggregator sites like Podchaser, and do drop us a line so we know when it's live.
And in addition to all the Britpop discourse, there was a lot of good discussion that came out of last week's story about the iOmega zip drives and other removable media formats. And most people reported that their zip drives were trouble-free, but we did hear from Sean Howell on Facebook, who said that he did iOmega tech support in the late 1990s, and that, quote, the vast majority of calls were because of their zip and jazz drives clicking. We were banned from even mentioning the dreaded COD click of death, but it was very real, unquote. I tried to ask him if there were any particular trends to what drives would go bad, like was it a particular week or month of manufacture. His answer was, quote, it was well known that if your drive was clicking, any disk you put in afterward would be corrupted. Talk about giving someone bad news. Jazz did it nowhere near as much as the zip parallel port, unquote. So maybe there was something about those parallel port models that was the worst. But that's the words of a former iOmega professional.
Everyone knew about that.
Well, that was what we talked about.
Knew.
Everyone knew about it, but who did it actually affect? And that's been part of the discussion. We all knew, but was it, how prevalent?
I have a mountain of zip disks. I use them as drink coasters now. We knew. Oh, yeah, we knew if you heard that click.
But what I didn't know was that if you put any disk you put in afterwards would get corrupted. That's
that I didn't know. That's new on me.
Gaming Historian has announced he's no longer going to make videos. A journey has reached its end for him after 15 years. Not a dramatic event, he just feels it's come to a natural conclusion. But he has left a gift. Thanks to R for linking on the subreddit the documents from the court proceedings between Nintendo and Universal.
And Pajako6502 linked us to an article from Tom's Hardware documenting that someone bought an Xbox 360 dev kit for a mere it says $5 here at a car boot sale in Edinburgh. Somebody here is getting their currency maybe mixed up. That's about 50 miles away from the city of Dundee, where DMA Design made Grand Theft Auto. Turns out that this Xbox had a 2007 beta build of GTA 4 on it, complete with content that didn't make the final cut, like a ferry system and zombies.
PP Data has posted his own creation, a Manic Miner written in JavaScript. It's, at least to my abilities to play it and perceive, a perfect copy of the Spectrum Classic. The Central Cavern awaits in your browser. Thank you for letting us know, and congratulations on making it, PP Data.
And doing Pajaco's bidding once again, he sent us to a Video Games Chronicle article about the fact that The first ever crane machine, claw machine game is believed to be the Taito Crown 602, first put out there in 1965, and Taito had been trying to find one. They didn't come up with the 602, but somebody has led them to the next model, the 603. It is apparently in poor shape, so it may need some sort of trash to treasure treatment.
C1 7525 links us to an emulator on GitHub called Clock Signal, or known as CLK. The blurb says it seeks to be invisible through static and runtime analysis, selecting and configuring the machine for any provided disk, ROM, or tape, and to run any commands necessary to launch it and accelerate loading. It also promises low latency and accurate emulation. There's a lot of promises there, and if it does any of that, it'll be superb. It's even got CRT emulation with phosphor decay. It will do all the micros: Acorn, Apple, Amstrad, Atari, Commodore, even the Sega Master System, although the Archimedes, the Plus 4, the early PC, and the Amiga are noted as upcoming. I'll be on the lookout for coverage in this because it seems incredible.
And there's news about Doom on a BBC Micro, heavy asterisk. Starcade 2084 links us to a Pixel Fandango video of a Doom running on a BBC Micro, and it's running very fast. And it's using, it's got the Acorn Research Machines CPU there in the form of a modern Raspberry Pi. So they're keeping it in the family and, driving it through the BBC Micro keyboard. But,
I've seen lots of little arcade machines, and by little I mean the ones at 30 centimetres or 12 inches time. But Bajaco's linked us to an Hackster.io article on a tiny Capcom arcade machine made by someone called LCL, and it's got a real CRT in it. They've taken a 6-inch CRT from a portable monitor, so you can get a real CRT to play your Capcom arcade games in. And hopefully it's anything but Street Fighter 2, because there's loads of good Capcom games. Don't stick to that.
And thank you to all of our contributors. If you want to join in, post articles, upvote, downvote, join in the comments, steer the actual programming of the show, please head over to reddit.com/r/thisweekinretro. So Chris is coming back next week, and he will doubtless lead off with a story about how a Geo Metro's 3-cylinder engine has been strapped to a big wheel that's been wrapped in electroluminescent wire or something. And by the way, when is EL Wire going to make a retro comeback? Like it's been over 20 years now. During the past 2 weeks of his absence, we've done a little Chris's Corner news brief where I've taken a popular news story that's somehow connected to transportation because, Chris owns 11 sports cars and pretty much only ever talks about the Sega Racing Classic Outrun on this show. I'm going to try something dangerous here. I'm going to see if I can satisfy the terms, I set them up, of Chris's Corner in a full feature without becoming infected by the Thing-esque body horror that completely subsumes your personality into nothing but the service of racing games. I'm going to try it. I spotted a Facebook post by Albin Killingback about the work that the self-professed C64 and ZX Spectrum enthusiast has been doing, disassembling some of the oldest standout commercial games for the Commodore 64. And when I looked at the list, I realized I'm looking at a Chris's Corner story. He's done a disassembly of Le Mans, or Le Mans, however we say that. Now, that's a racing game. I'm going to ask if Duncan can give me a ding here. Maybe Dave, can you give me the ding? And then Duncan can overlap it if he likes it. Thank you. So he's got a disassembly of Le Mans. That's a racing game. Check.
Ding.
He's got Jupiter Lander. Now, never mind the fact that you can't land on Jupiter because it's a gas giant, but this is clearly part of the space race. And so that's a big red spot of a check.
Ding.
He's got BC's Quest for Tires. It's a comic strip inspired multi-stage arcade game in which the main character, he's cruising around on a tire. You can speed him up and slow him down. There's a speed readout on the screen. Clearly a racing game. Check.
Ding.
It is not a tire. It is the BC tires were made of carved stone. So it was a stone disc with a wooden pole on it, and then he was standing on that.
Sir, the game is called BC's Quest for Tires. I am going to allow it. Your objection is noted.
Tires. He does not, in fact, ever get one.
Now we know the deep lore.
It was not a good game, but it was a funny comic strip.
I disagree, sir.
It was okay. It was something unusual as a game, at least. Yeah. It wasn't boring.
And there's also the space combat game Omega Race. Race, that's clearly a racing game. Another check.
Ding.
Thank you.
Point of order.
Ah.
Mega Race is not a racing game. It's a shooting game that takes place in a loop. I actually was at just played this just a couple of weeks ago. I was at a retro. Okay.
We have to service the beast. So there's a lot of this reverse engineering going on out there. There's a combination of people who have simply had a lot of time to pick through the code bases, but there's also growing sophistication in disassemblers and even emulators and virtual machines that are purpose-built and tuned to help enable this kind of work. Now, sometimes these disassemblies will lead to a bug fix or an enhanced version. Other times they lead to ports. And last week, we talked about the work that's been done to finally bring a production-grade version of the classic space trading game Elite to Atari 8-bit platforms, and that's based on Mark Moxon's extensive work pulling that game apart. Now, there's already a version of Elite out there which does credit Moxon's core for the Commodore VIC-20 that was published by Alexei Ibin. And Ibin has been keeping busy in recent years doing other seemingly impossible tasks like reverse engineering and porting games like Archon and Ultimas 1, 2, and 3 to the VIC as well. And this is a great time to ask you, Jeff, did you spend any time at all reverse engineering or disassembling or otherwise poking around at code of the CRPGs that you enjoyed kind of before you started publishing your own?
Absolutely not. I love it when people do that, and I just find it endlessly fascinating. But I am a practical man. And I like, what is the technical term for it? Money. I'm my business is making the new things. And then I leave them behind for other people to fiddle with. When I retire, I eventually hope to just take my source code and vomit it out on the internet for the amusement of all the boys and girls. I wrote a game called Blades of Exile in 1997, which was a very early scenario creation system where you could make your own adventures and share them on the internet. A big trick when nobody actually has the World Wide Web. And that I open sourced that, and someone took it over and worked super hard and got it. It's on it. Blades of Exile is on itch.io now if you want to play something really retro. So my job is to make those things and then hope someone has an interest. But that's never quite been my bag. I respect it from a distance. I like tinkering with new stuff.
So in researching this story, I did find a lot of parallel projects and communities. There's retroreversing.com, there's romhacking.net. Both of them seem to mostly focus on console games. There's at least one GitHub destination that's devoted to original NES game disassemblies. And it did make me idly wonder if any of those smaller games like Excitebike could be ported to the Commodore 64, which that's a very Chris's Corner question to ask. So I may in fact have been infected by the body horror. Oops. There's also a pretty half-hearted attempt to chart commercial video games with source code available on Wikipedia. It was very, very incomplete. I also noticed that my friend Robin Harbin from the 8-Bit Show and Tell YouTube channel was mentioned in the Killing Back list. And that's in part because of the work that Robin has done with that Le Mans code. So I asked Robin if there were other examples of this going on out there that I shouldn't forget. And in addition to reminding me about all that great stuff that Alexei Ibin has been doing for the Commodore VIC-20, he pointed me to a video from David Yaud that was published in late December, which takes an hour-long journey through the code of the RPG Dragon's Eye, which was published by Epyx for, of all things, the Commodore PET, along with the C64 and Atari and Apple platforms. And this is that pin that I put in that, Dave, when you were like, it was all about the Apple II. And there's some stuff that was out there that was Commodore PET first and then kind of migrated over.
Yeah.
One of the standout elements of this video was Yaud explaining these hidden mechanics that affected gameplay. And that's something that does show up in other games, including the alternate reality series. But it's great to have a very early and fully documented variant here. And as a bonus, the original developer of the game, Robert Leland, showed up in the comments to quickly congratulate Yaud on his efforts. So is there anything on your wish lists to get this sort of disassembly documentation and the fix report treatment, or just something else you want to see pulled apart for research or posterity?
I'm thinking about all of the old games that I loved and that influenced me. And one of the sad things about the role-playing game genre is that old arcade games can transfer to the future very well. Like Doom is still fun. Doom 2 is still fun. Pong is a banger. Pong is fun. But even though Ultima 4 is incredibly revolutionary and influential and changed my life in a lot of ways and set me on my current path, I never recommend anyone actually play Ultima 4.
Oh no.
I think that
Oh no.
I think that people should study it, and there's a lot that's fascinating about it. But we've I'm sure it's still fun. I'm sure if I sat down with Ultima 4 and played it, I'd be like, yeah, this is absolutely fine. This is adequate in ways that I never dreamed a game could be adequate. But man, we've done better. This is one genre where we just figured out how to do the thing better.
I will say that if you want to play an Ultima game that has aged the best, then probably Ultima Underworld.
Okay, that I can see that. Ultima 6, I can still see playing. If someone could fix Ultima 6, the stuff that's messed in Ultima 7, I can see that as yeah. And but you'll note it's still kind of not taking over the world.
I get you. If you look at the Ultima games, what Richard Garriott was doing was he was publishing games that I don't think it's obvious now when you look back, but these games were at the very cutting edge of what was possible. He was pushing what games could do. It's not obvious looking at them now, but if you look at Ultima 4, it's fair to say that if computers could have done more, Ultima 4 would have done more. I mean,
they squeezed every bit of juice out of that machine.
Yeah.
I just, as a technical accomplishment, as a design accomplishment, the Ultima games were just world class. Some of the all-time great works in this genre, and yet I still cannot, in good conscience, recommend that someone run out and buy a copy of Fantasy, run out and buy a copy of Wizard's Crown. It's
they're all on the shelf behind me.
Yeah, and they were great, and I stole from them with reckless abandon. But if someone comes to me and says, "Hey, I want to play a role-playing game. I'm not going to play Spiderweb Software because I don't have time for that nonsense. What am I going to play?" I'm going to say Baldur's Gate 3, of course. Why would I not? Why would you not say that?
Yeah, Baldur's Gate 2.
Also a great game. But again, I think Baldur's Gate 3 is cutting edge. That game is undeniable.
The ones, if I was going to do it, the ones I think would already be done. Either the source code or enough about them from different versions has been learned. I don't think there's that many secrets to pick out about things about these older games. So it would probably be newer games like Bethesda games or Infinity Engine games. So things like Fallout 3, Oblivion, Morrowind.
Even Fallout 1 and 2. I bet those games...
the Interplay ones,
They need... I think Fallout 1 and 2 could use a polish pass, but they would still be really fun. Baldur's Gate, I'm sure, is still a super fun game. Yes. Baldur's Gate 2, total classic. I think that would be a blast now. And it would teach the kids about the first edition AD&D system. That'll show them. But yeah, if someone could just, my interest in someone getting like the source code to Baldur's Gate 2 was to release it with a bit of polish. Though they've been doing that a lot lately. Actually, I shouldn't even say, because there's some very polished.
Yeah.
I just bought Icewind Dale. I might finally play that. That's one of the few that I never played, and it's got new resolutions and everything. So maybe it's great. So I'm just speaking about stuff that I played on my Apple II in 1985. Wizardry is probably still kind of fun.
I don't think there's that many really that from the olden times that need the enhancement. I think it's the late 90s or mid 90s onwards. Things like, even if you look at X-Wing, the X-Wing series, which is one of the most fantastic game series ever. We don't have the source code for it, but people have created new engines that play better than the original. So,
I'll bet.
Yeah, I don't know. We need something.
Didn't Dark Forces just get a really schmancy reboot or remaster? And was good? Yeah, I'm sure that game. I played the hell out of that game. I bet that game's great now still.
It is. Yeah, it is.
And now I want a fantasy remake. Anyway, these disassembly and decapsulation and improvement projects are some of the coolest things out there, even though I have the barest understanding of anything I'm looking at. But I do like the opportunity to open, browse, and gamely try to keep up with what I'm looking at. There will be lots of links to these projects and communities in the show notes if you'd like to learn more. And also, please don't light me on fire or blow me up with dynamite if I start talking about Outrun. I'm fine. Definitely have not been assimilated by an alien obsessed with racing games. I'm not going to harm anybody, and there's nothing wrong with me. And if there was, I'm all better now.
On now to question of the week. And last week we asked you, airbrush or light pen, koala pad or coloured pencil. What's your favourite old school art style? And the top answer was, Jason?
It was from Richard Shears, Driller and Darkside. I still love that box art to this day, so I'm unsure what that style is. Airbrush, but that style. We had a number of answers that were like, here's the style. I don't know what it is. Here's what I'm saying. Rose-tinted Amstrad glasses are firmly on there, I know, but I'm not ashamed. The artwork just sent my imagination on a journey that games helped reinforce. There's Dave. If you're on video there, you can see. There it is.
Driller and Darkside. Jeff Mendoza was next, and he says the airbrushing on 1980s arcade machines and arcade flyers, Donkey Kong in particular, it's a masterpiece.
And the third answer is Mucker 2002 potato printing. Now, the thing is, I know absolutely nothing about art, so I'm not actually sure whether this is an air pen or an auto brush or an actual thing, or if it's that thing that kids do where they cut a potato in half.
It's the thing that kids do.
A stamp out of it.
I had not thought about potato printing in 40 plus years. When I saw it, I'm like, yes, this is exactly what this question is for.
Yeah, that's retro before retro. Can I give my answer?
Sure.
Yeah.
Whatever old Atari cartridge box art was, is undeniably, to me, the best video game cover art. Is just the absolute goat for video game cover art. Those Atari cartridges box were just, there's even, you can buy an art book with all of those pieces because they're so evocative and so beautiful, and they do such a great job of creating a context in your head, so that although the Atari games look so simple, you have that box art in your head, and it elevates the game.
Yeah, that actually showed up in the answers. Atario kind of pointed to us. It was the 8-bit line, but you could see the similar art style. And Northway No jumped in and essentially was trying to lay the blame for shifting away from that art style on Jack Trammell. But if you look at the pre-Trammell 8-bit products, they're like the 800 XL, they were shifting away from the art style by 83. So we cannot blame Jack for this one.
And the question for this week, we'd like you to answer at the subreddit. Where would people go to the subreddit, Jason? Where is it? They
should go to reddit.com/r/thisweekinretro, or of course, there is a handy mobile app that will save you all that typing.
The Voyager mission sent an analog record into space to help aliens understand us. Because that's what 1970s tech allowed. Today, we could send a radiation-hardened, solar-powered laptop on a probe. What would you load onto that laptop so the aliens would understand humanity?
I don't even need to think about that. The greatest, most evocative piece of art humanity has ever created that says the most about who we are as a species, about our hopes and dreams, is, of course, the song Tub Thumping by Chumbawamba. So I would encase on gold a copy of that song, and then I would say 20 to 30 more copies of that song.
Not your games then, no?
No.
Not GeneForge? Kind of, they've got very powerful gene manipulation technology. We should avoid them.
If you first ported my game GeneForge into a copy of the song Tub Thumping by Chumbawamba. I
get knocked down and I get up again. And we'll be back next week. Thank you very much for joining us, Jeff. I hope you had fun.
Oh, thank you. That was a blast.
Yeah. Spidersoft.
Spiderweb Software. Avernum 4 Greeting Glory. GeneForge 1 Mutagen. Ask for them by name. If pain continues, call your doctor.
All right. Get them Steam, GOG, all the places. Thank you so much for joining us. And we will see you back with Chris, with no doubt a driving story. He's been sending us pictures of him drinking and enjoying himself in arcades, so he's been having fun. But we'll see you next week.
They make us wave and then say that we're waving, Jeff. Because
people who are listening in audio don't know they're waving unless we say
it's not necessary.
They're waving.
I am capable of receiving and interpreting context clues.
Bye.
This Week in Retro was written and presented by Chris from 005 AGIMA, Jason from the Retro Adventurers, and Dave. It was edited by me, Duncan Styles. The podcast version of the show is available through your favourite podcast app, including Apple Podcasts and Spotify. And the video version is available on the This Week in Retro YouTube channel.
Join our community subreddit at r/thisweekinretro to suggest and vote on the stories we cover on the show. Please give us a like and subscribe to help us reach new viewers.
If you enjoy our show and would like to support it, then please check out the link to our Patreon page in the show notes or description. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you next time for more up-to-date news for out-of-date tech.